if you want to lead an extraordinary life and one that's genuinely got a sense of meaning and fulfillment that runs through it, you want to be operating in your element as regularly as you possibly can be. You want to be living, what do I want to be doing? All these big questions become so much easier to answer when you have clarity on your values, because they got the Mercedes, they got the big house or whatever. Many of them feel trapped because yes, they have the money, yes, everything looks shiny from the outside, they are not in alignment with their values.
Today, we're going to talk about how you can map out your career so it's in alignment with your strengths and passions, enabling you to live a fulfilling and joyful life. Not knowing what you want to do can be stressful. Too much choice, no clue, pressures from what others expect of you can all be stressful. And actually, that's something I've experienced. And I'm really, really excited to have my guest on today to discuss all of this and how to navigate this uncertainty and lead a really fulfilling life. Steve Chamberlain, you are one of the world's leading coaches in the field of purpose and helping people to live truly fulfilling and joyful lives. You work with clients from all walks of life and at various different stages of their careers, business leaders, professionals, and emerging talent. You were a former events director from the London Business Forum, where you worked alongside thought leaders, including Malcolm Gladwell. Little book drop, if you haven't read Blink, absolutely do that. And Ken Robinson, the most watched TED Talk ever, read The Element, before discovering and pursuing your passion for helping others find fulfillment and becoming a coach. You have just launched your incredible book on purpose. What are you really here to do? And here it is, guys, where you lay out your years of expertise. Steve, I've got to say, I'm really pleased to have you on the show. And, I've benefited so much from the knowledge that you have, and I'm really excited for you to share this with my audience here at Careers Badger. Steve, welcome to the show.
Amazing. Thanks, James. And yeah, huge pleasure, absolute huge pleasure to be here. So thanks for the opening up the opportunity.
Cheers, Steve. And so, Steve, I think what we'll do is I just want to just jump straight into, all of the knowledge that you have and that you present in your book. And fundamental to the approach that you provide is this. It's the idea of building self-knowledge. That's knowledge about, taking the time to understand ourselves and what's important to us. And a big component of this is this whole concept of values. And I think, just for the benefit of listeners, can you just talk us through what are values and why is it important for young people to be aware of them?
Absolutely. Okay, so values are the words that most closely represent who you are or what matters to you most at the very deepest level. So who you are or what matters to you most at the deepest level. So it could be words like, my core values are integrity, growth, family, meaning, and excellence. But it could be other ones like adventure or courage or leadership or freedom or on and on and on. So the crucial thing here is the word is not the thing. So the word is just like a symbol or a signpost that points to or represents the thing. And what I'm talking about there is, I kind of point back at heart center here. So your values are kind of who you are at that really deep level. So the reason why it's so important for young people and everyone, in my experience, to get crystal clarity on their values is that once you have that, it's like you know yourself on a really profound level. And you're then able to use that self-knowledge to be able to guide and inform every action, every choice, every decision that you take in your lifetime. So a life without understanding your values is almost, or can be experienced almost like a rudderless life. You're not quite sure which direction to head in, particularly when the big decisions come. Do I want to go to university? If so, what course? What kind of career do I want to lead? What kind of relationships do I want to build in my life? Where do I want to be living? What do I want to be doing? All these big questions become so much easier to answer when you have clarity on your values, because actually that's the right path for me, and crucially the right path for you because of your unique set of values is going to be profoundly different to the right path for someone else who has a different set of values. So it's that real deep self-knowledge that enables you to almost navigate your journey in life.
I really like that. And I think what was useful for me to understand is, like, you know, if you do something, you know, for example, you tell a lie, or you know, you invariably do something and you feel remorse, or you know, you feel a sense of guilt potentially. Maybe you've told a white lie that's, you know, that's had repercussions. You can sort of know that you've conflicted a value by the sense that you don't feel right internally, right? And is that your value compass at work in those sort of circumstances?
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect example. So, I mean, we've all, exactly like you've said, I'm sure everyone has had that experience where almost there might be something in your past, a memory from your past, that even if we go there now, and probably as I'm talking, you might be starting to go there mentally, we actually don't want to go there because it brings up all those emotions. You're like, oh my God, why did I do that?
Sure.
Like, I wish I could rewind time and undo that action. Exactly. That's a sign that you will have probably unconsciously violated one of your core values.
Okay.
So, for example, if you have a core value of honesty, then times in your life, maybe even from really early childhood, times when you were dishonest, it's almost like at the time you wish that time could be rewound and you could undo it, or you wish the world could just, you could just hide from that situation, and it'll bring up those same emotions now. So exactly, there are almost clues all the way about what your values are, and those times are an amazing example of that's a core value at play.
Brilliant. And I think what will be really useful, Steve, is, can you just lay it out, give us a strategy for young people? You know, how can people actually go about discovering what their values actually are? What strategy can you give advice on?
Yeah, absolutely. So the place a lot of people start is with a list of values. And actually, interestingly, in my experience, that my invitation or my advice would be not to start there. And the only reason for that is the words in our language are loaded. So there are some words that we like the sound of. So, integrity, I have a bit of that. That sounds great. Leadership. Okay, I'm going to take that one on board, etc.
Yeah.
But then there may be other value words that we don't feel are as positive, largely because of our society and our culture and our language. So words like control, winning, those kind of things, often we kind of think, oh, I don't like the sound of that. It's not a great, that's not a good thing. But you only have to look at, people, role models like Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal, who I am convinced have values either exactly or very close to winning. Like, it just runs through their core. And I imagine if you'd seen them as young kids, that was just in them, that competition, that desire to win. But they've honored and aligned around that value in such a positive way that they're role models for millions of young people and millions of adults like me around the world. So every value is perfect. It's
Sure.
just that our alignment around it may not be perfect. So if we're not going to pick them off a list, then in answer to your question, how then do we go about finding them? So your values have gone with you into every situation you have ever been in. Every relationship, every conversation, every day in school, every situation ever. So the process is almost playing detective to try and figure out, well, where are the clues that show what my values are? And what you touched on earlier is a great example. So your values show up most clearly in the real peak and trough moments in your life. So anytime you've had a real high, almost like your mind has taken like a Polaroid photo of that memory, and that could be any area of your life. It could be an amazing peak memory from a holiday. It could be the day you passed or the moment you passed your driving test. It could be a time that you've started work or done some work experience and loved it. Whatever it may be, anytime you've had a real peak experience that stands out in your memory, that's a sign that you've been in alignment with your core values. So you'll have been honoring your values, or someone else will have been honoring your values. Then the flip side of that, and almost the mirror to that, is any of your trough experiences. Any times you've really struggled, and we talked about a time when you regret from your past, that's a sign that you will have violated a core value. And it could be that someone else has done it. So again, using the same example of honesty, if that's a core value, if a friend or family member was dishonest in your past, that could be a sign. If you got really, really triggered by that, more so than you would expect other people to, it really bugged you, and maybe that relationship has struggled to go back to where it was before that moment, that's a sign that they have violated or compromised one of your core values. Using another example, it could be a time, if you value creativity, it's so important to you to be creative. Lessons in school where there's no creativity, where you're just told do this and write this and follow these steps, and there's no opportunity to be creative, that's going to be a real challenge. So your energy is going to drop. So again, when you're playing detective, you're looking for these little clues. Well, when does my energy drop? When do I really struggle? And again, the peaks will be the flip of that. So if creativity is a core value, you love the process of creating, then actually any of your lessons where, oh my God, I love that lesson, that's amazing, you'll probably find out, do you know what, there's creativity there, there's the opportunity to create. So you're following this process of almost surfacing what's already there and then giving it a name, which is, the symbol or the signpost, which is things like integrity or growth or whatever the word means to you. And it's at that point that you might then want to look at a values list and just sense check that you've got the words that resonate most strongly for you.
Fine. And then to encapsulate those peak moments where you experience that flow-like state, and you're right, it's a Polaroid, it's viscerally in your brain. You can trigger those words, and perhaps performance, for example, say you were on stage and the crowd were, or the audience were on your every word. That word encapsulates that feeling and that value at that point in time. Is that another practical example of it?
Yeah, exactly. So, and again, when you're playing detective, test out some different words. So you're looking for the word that resonates most strongly. If it really resonates, if it lands for you, then you're like that, okay, that's the value. And also you're looking for a sense of almost timelessness when you find a core value, one that runs right through you. So you almost go, do you know what, performance, that every time in my life that I've honored that's been a high. And every single time that's been compromised or violated, either by me or by others, that's been a real challenge. So again, if performance were a core value, then again, any time that you've performed, you'll have loved it. It will have felt amazing. Any time that you will have seen those around you perform, you will have loved, or if you've supported them, that would be amazing. But similarly, if you're, imagine you're in a classroom and you're put into kind of a small team or a group to work on a project together. If some of those team members aren't performing, if they're not pulling their weight, do you know what? They don't know it, but they're compromising a value for you. So you would know that's a core value if you get triggered by that more so than you would expect someone else to. Those are the little clues that you're searching for.
It's really good. And then in terms of sort of a number of values that we should be aiming for to sort of get written down eventually, what would be your recommendation?
Yeah. There's nothing prescriptive in any of this process, but I guess as a helpful guide, my invitation would be to aim for somewhere between 4 and 7 core values.
Got it.
The only rationale for that is that in my experience, any fewer than 4, there's a risk that you're going to miss something that is really important to you. And you're going to be able to use your values once you have clarity on them to guide and inform every decision that you take through your life. So if, for example, you missed something that's important, you may then make a decision. So for example, if freedom wasn't in your values list, but actually it is a core value, but it wasn't in your 3, and then you made a decision that honored the other values, but then you realize if it was a career choice in the future and you realize actually there's no freedom through that role, maybe there's not the opportunity to work for myself, or there's not the opportunity to control my own workflow, then you would suffer. So fewer than 4, you may miss something important, and any more than 7, there's just the opposite risk, which is the clarity goes a little bit. You lose that absolute clarity of having the big players front of mind when you make your big decisions. So you can absolutely go for more than 7 if it serves you, but as a guide, I'd aim for somewhere between 4 and 7.
I just want to give some personal experience on top of this. Is that for example, in my life, so for me, I've identified that freedom is absolutely an important value for me. I like to be able to have, I like to be able to have control of where I go throughout my day. And since being a teacher, for example, it absolutely aligns with my value of freedom, because yes, I have to be in the classroom at certain times of my day, but actually outside of that time, and by the way, performance is another value of mine. I love actually being in the lessons and performing and actually engaging with students whilst I'm in the lessons. But outside of the lesson time, I'm free to essentially go wherever I want within the school site and do what I want with my time, provided I'm doing the work and getting the lessons created and marking the work, etc. So that actual career decision, having had the knowledge of what my values are, has actually allowed me to really enjoy being a teacher. And then, prior to being a teacher, I absolutely have understood that for me, and I'm not saying this is the case for everybody, I'm not the sort of guy that likes to be expected to be at the same desk in the same office throughout my working day. And just realizing that actually, well, that's potentially due to my freedom being compromised. Having that knowledge absolutely has served me. So that's just me wanting to give a practical example of why it's important to understand your values, and why, Steve, I'm excited to have you here. So,
amazing. And it's a great example. And it is a kind of a key insight here is that your values are unique to you.
Sure.
So when you get clarity, once you've got your 4 to 7 core values, it's almost like you've got a compass by which to navigate. If you think of life as a journey, then your compass is your values by which to navigate by. And if the closer you stay in alignment with your values, let's imagine as your true north is in alignment with all your values, the closer you stay in alignment with that in all areas of your life, the easier life is. It's almost like you're going with the flow of the river, and everything kind of just makes sense, and it's easy. Your energy takes you there, and everything seems much easier. The further we navigate away from that, the harder things get. And when you get too far away, we start to suffer. And I've experienced that in my past. It was actually the journey that I went on to find my values. Was in my past, I didn't know what values were, and I was way out of alignment with them, and I really suffered. So that I now see suffering as actually serving an amazing purpose, which is it tells us when we're off track, as long as we don't numb ourselves to the suffering.
Sure.
But the whole purpose behind this book is you don't need to go through a decade of suffering like I did. And like many people on the planet are doing right now, you can get clarity on your values early on in your journey, so that the suffering isn't needed. It's there if it comes about, it just shows you've lost your way a bit.
Yeah.
But you don't need that. Not everyone needs to go through that stage. You can just get clarity on your values and align your life in that direction, and it will serve you and everyone around you to do so.
And I guess the obvious thing I just want to deal with is perhaps a young person's thinking, well, there's, I'm only 15, I'm only 16. Have I had enough experience to have informed what my values are? What would you say to that, objection?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really valid one. I guess what comes up for me is you will already have values because they just run through us. They just run through us. I mean, like I say, the example I drew upon earlier, Rafa Nadal, Roger Federer, you don't. I know if I could have rewound time and been with them as young kids, do you know what? We see now on the tennis court in their 30s is exactly what would have been running through them. They wouldn't have yet developed the skill set around it, but there would have been the same value set kind of in there.
Yeah.
And let's say 15 years, if you've got 15 years of data, and I do view it as in this way, if you've got 15 years of data, 15 sets of 365 days of living on this planet, being in relationships, having conversations, being in school, whatever, think of all that data. Through that, you will have some highs and some lows. Yeah. So my invitation would be just to get really curious and look for consistency. What patterns play out consistently? Do you know what? Every single time I'm being authentic, I seem to have highs. And every single time I've been inauthentic or other people around me are inauthentic, that seems to really trigger me. So maybe authenticity is a value. So you can jot it down.
Yeah.
So my invitation is to imagine you've got all this wealth of data, and just to get curious, play detective, and stay open. It's an open book. So will you understand more about your values when you're 25 to when you're 15? Almost definitely, yes. Can values evolve and change a little bit over time? Yes. And core values tend to stay pretty constant as well. So my invitation would be just get curious, have a play, see if you can explore, and we're going to make available, I know, the stage 1 of On Purpose, which talks you through that journey. My invitation would be have a play, see what comes up, and you can always revisit later in your journey.
I really like it. So I just want to move on. So let's assume that we've put in the work to try and identify our values. We understand now that it serves as a sort of compass in helping deter in terms of navigating decisions. Your decisions are informed based on your values, essentially. So can I just ask, what are the other key components that people should be aware of to lead a fulfilling life, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And you're absolutely right. Just in asking that question, values, I see it almost at this deepest level. So that's like almost the foundation knowledge that is crucial for all of us. And it's not the only piece of the puzzle by any means. So there are absolutely other things that come in above that are really crucial. And probably the most important for me is finding your element. And I'm drawing upon the work of Sir Ken Robinson here, who you mentioned earlier, got the #1 most watched TED Talk, and is a phenomenal speaker and thought leader in this field. So when he coined the frame, the element, what he's talking about is where your strengths, the things that you are naturally good at, and your passions, the things that you love to do, intersect. So whenever and wherever your strengths and passions intersect, you're in your element. So it's not a case that we've all just got one element. We will have numerous elements. Anytime strengths and passions come together, that's where we are. So for me, it's a crucial stage. If you want to lead an extraordinary life and one that's genuinely got a sense of meaning and fulfillment that runs through it, you want to be operating in your element as regularly as you possibly can be. Because when you're in your element, when you're playing to your strengths, when you're playing to your passions, your energy just goes through the roof. You love what you're doing. There's a sense of flow to your life, and you add the most value. It's where you excel. So understanding your values. So who am I? What matters to me most at the deepest level, and aligning my life around that. And then building on that with knowledge of your strengths, the things that you're good at, your passions, the things that you love to do. If you are regularly in your element, plotting your life on that line as well, then that is a pretty remarkable life.
I would agree. And I'm just thinking of the students that I teach. Certainly for younger students, it's quite difficult to actually have the self-confidence to identify what you're good at. And I think that, just strategies that I would say are talk to your form tutor, read through your reports, think to yourself, what have I scored well and when have I enjoyed, certain lessons? Have you got any other ideas about how you can actually recognize what your strengths are?
Yeah, absolutely. And the same goes for passions, by the way. One of the most common things I find in coaching is sometimes I'll be working with people in their 50s. And they freak out when I say, "What are your passions?" It's like, "Oh, I haven't got any passions. I don't think I've got any." And when you dig under the surface, it's like, "Oh, okay. Oh, that's a passion. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine." So I guess my invitation in terms of surfacing these things is other people often know you as well, if not better sometimes than you do yourself, because sometimes they're not blind to some things that you may be too close to see. So you could always speak to family members, to friends, and just say, what strengths do you naturally see in me? What does it feel like I'm really good at? And you could ask the passions question as well. So getting other people can be a great mirror for us and can see some things we're blind to. And I guess it's just my invitation here in terms of strengths, just ask yourself, what just comes pretty naturally to me? And jot down everything. We're not talking here just about things that you're going to want to do in your career, because an extraordinary life is one where you're in your element outside of your career as well. So you might be jotting down things like, do you know what? I'm really good at cooking. Brilliant. That's a strength. It just comes to me. Like, yes, I can get better at it. Yes, I could practice more, but you know what? It just comes pretty naturally to me. You may be really good at driving. You may be really good at listening. You may be really good at creative thinking. You may be really good at painting. You may be really good at, and on and on and on. So my invitation would be just get curious, jot down all these different things where you have strengths, and then ask yourself in the passion space, what is it that I love to do? Genuinely love to do. And the clues here, you know, you can look at your YouTube history. What is it that you search for? No one's paying you to do that. You're obviously passionate about it. You obviously care about it.
That's great. That's so true. Yeah. I like that strategy. Just
Yeah.
see what you're watching. That does reveal a lot, doesn't it?
Totally. Even things like Netflix. You know, what series do you watch? Why are you drawn to those? Again, no one's paying you to do it. So when I say those things, people go, oh, well, do you know what? I'm really interested in this. You know, I love a bit of crime, or I love a bit of drama, or I love a bit of, you know, I love sport, or whatever else it may be. So you end up with almost two lists. What are you good at? And what are you passionate about? And then you can just ask yourself, well, how could I bring those together? Because it's at the intersection between them that you're in your element. So start to think, not just career, but in your life. Well, do you know what? I'm really passionate about sport. And do you know what? I'm really good at swimming. So do you know what? Why am I going to the gym just because my mates do? Actually, do you know what? The swimming pool, that's where I'm going to thrive. Every time I go to the swimming pool, I love it. So why don't I do that more often? So again, there's no right and wrong. It's whatever is true for us. And if you build your life and in time your career around your element, you will thrive, and you become inexpendable to the organizations that you may go on to work for, because nobody can replace you, because you're where you thrive.
And you're basically, you're happy, aren't you? And you're happy people just deliver better. They're more productive, and they add more value. So that absolutely makes sense.
Yeah. Totally.
So I really like this, Steve. So we've talked about values. We've talked about element where strengths and passions intersect. What's next? I suppose if I can ask you that question.
Well, I guess if we were following the path that's laid out in On Purpose, the next stage is finding purpose. And the reason it wasn't the first chapter in the book, the reason it kind of comes towards that end of this process that we've just talked through, is in my experience, to find purpose, we almost need the pieces of the puzzle that lead us there. So finding your purpose without understanding who you are at the deepest level, your values, is really hard. So actually clarity on that comes first. Understanding your strengths and your passions and where you're in your element is a crucial part to finding your purpose, because your purpose will require you to make your unique contribution, which will need you to be in your element. If you're out of your element, you cannot be on purpose, really. So once you've got these almost key pieces of the puzzle, then you're able to start to ask yourself the purpose question. And the purpose question is a really interesting one, because again, it can do one of two things. It can get people excited and leaning in, or it can freak people out and they go, whoa, you know, purpose, that's just too big. Like, surely not everyone has a purpose.
Sure.
But in my experience, actually everyone has a purpose when we give it time and when we allow ourselves to get curious. But the key thing is, it's not about saying there's one thing that you need to do for the rest of your life. And it's also not about saying that everyone needs to set up a charity, or everyone needs to go and change the world in the way that Mahatma Gandhi did. That's a misunderstanding of purpose. For some people, depending on your value set and your element, it may draw you to huge, work on a global scale. For the vast majority of us, actually, do you know what? It's going to be much more local. It's going to be within our family, within our community, within our small day-to-day actions that we would fulfill purpose. So that's the next stage of the journey, is kind of getting clarity on what's the unique contribution you're here to make in this lifetime, which is how I define purpose.
Fine. And I think, as someone that's working through all of this, I think purpose is definitely I think it's the hardest thing to think about, because you're right. There are lots of preconceived things that you might think, well, hang on a sec, does everybody have, misconceptions about the fact that perhaps everyone doesn't have a purpose, but you think that they do?
Yeah, just in my experience, and again, I'm at a certain stage on my journey, so I'm open to
Sure.
everything. But in my experience, we all have a purpose. I guess I could give you a shortcut to purpose, if that would be helpful. Which is, so your purpose, as I understand it at this point, is to live in perfect alignment with your values, and to operate in your element, so that you can add unique value to the world.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. Be true to who you are. Operate where you're meant to be, where you thrive, where you can add most value, and in purpose of helping to contribute, helping to make the world a better place. And again, that may be on a global scale. For many of us, it's on a moment by moment, much more smaller scale. So to help play this out a little bit, because it's such a broad subject. So that's kind of in a nutshell,
Yeah.
what purpose means for me. It can then be helpful. It's not essential, but it can then be helpful to find a sentence or a couple of sentences that define a little bit for you. Well, what does that mean for me? What if I was going to apply that and have clarity on my purpose, my unique contribution? What might that be? And again, understanding your values, understanding your strengths and your passions is a key part of the journey to getting that clarity. So there's two kind of criteria that you would ideally want your purpose statement to fulfill to be really helpful. So the first is that you want it to be broad enough to cover a lifetime of action. So if a purpose statement is in any way restricting, that's the antithesis of purpose. Purpose is about, energizes you. If you feel restricted by it in any way, that's not your purpose statement. So you want it to be broad enough to cover a lifetime of action, yet paradoxically narrow enough that it gives you clarity on which of the almost infinite things you could get involved with to say no to. So broad enough to cover a lifetime of action, yet narrow enough that you have clarity on where you are meant to operate, what you want to be, where you want to be playing effectively. So for example, my purpose is to help people create and lead extraordinary, enlightened lives. So I deliberately, when crafting that to help people create and lead extraordinary, enlightened lives, I consciously chose not to include things like my purpose is to help people find their purpose. I thought about it, and then I thought, but I don't know 20 years from now, is that still where I'm going to be? I honestly don't know it. At this point in my journey, yeah, definitely. And my energy is here right now, but who knows what that might evolve to in 20 years' time. So if I'd narrowed it to that, it would have felt restricting and limiting. So it's broad enough that what we're doing right now is fully on purpose for me, because your listeners hopefully are starting to get some thoughts. It's starting to trigger some things. They might start to clarify what their values are, what their element is. So this is bang on purpose. Writing the book was bang on purpose, so it's broad enough to cover that. The work I do with Ivy House, where we met, facilitating and leading training on stage, that's bang on purpose. But also it leaves it open that there may be things, and there will be things I've got no idea that I'll come on to do in time. Maybe I'll run my own programs, or maybe I'll be a speaker on stage. It's broad enough to cover that, yet it is also narrow enough that it lets me know what to say no to. So that purpose statement enabled me to know that, executive coaching is a lucrative space and an amazing space for many people to work in. And it's not my space, because I'm here to help people create and lead extraordinary, enlightened lives. Someone else might have a purpose to help organizations maximize their potential, then go and work in that exec space. But it gave me clarity that that's not where I'm meant to be. It gave me clarity on the book I wanted to write. It's just a helpful piece. So it's almost like your values give you your compass, and your purpose is almost like your destination. It's the pin in the map. And if you plot your life on the line between those two, that is a remarkable life.
I really like that. And I think, Steve, I'm just going to ask you straight up. So we've talked about values. We've talked about, finding your element, passions and strengths, that intersection. We're talking about purpose. Can I ask you, what would be your advice to a young person who literally has no clue on what they want to do next after school or maybe after university? Can you just give, in a nutshell, what would you say to them?
Yeah. welcome to the club.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
been
yeah, me
there.
too. Been there too. Yeah,
Been
yeah.
there, been there. I went to university. I went to university in Sussex, and I was signed up to do computer science. And the only reason I went to do computer science is because it's what my dad did. I had no clue. I just went there to do what my dad did. I sat down in the first lecture, and the lecturer said, "Put your hands up." You know, we had a room of about 200 people, and he said, "Put your hand up if you already are programming at a really high level." And almost everyone, oh no, some people put their hands up. Then he said, "How many of you program, you know, quite well and have done A levels or whatever?" Almost everyone's hand went up. How many of you have never done any coding at all? Me.
Really? Oh my
So that
God.
was a panic moment. Then I got the books that they give out, and I started reading the books, and I was like, not only do they make no sense to me, my energy dropped off a cliff. I hadn't even bothered to read up on this stuff before signing up to the course. It would have been a disaster. Luckily, University of Sussex were flexible enough with me that when I went and explained, they said, okay. And I actually went to a lecture, a psychology lecture, because someone else in my dorm was in a similar position, but they just wanted to switch courses within psychology, not quite as crazy as me, complete change. So she went to a different lecture, and I said, can I just come and join you? So I went and joined a lecture that I was not on the course of, psychology, and my energy went straight up.
That's
I
great.
felt like I was in my tribe. That was the place for me. And luckily they let me switch. So welcome to the club is the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is welcome to the club, and well done for being conscious of that so early. And so many of my coaching clients are way further down the line than you are and feel trapped. You may look at them and think, wow, look at that person, they're driving the Porsche. You know, they got the Mercedes, they got the big house or whatever. Many of them feel trapped because yes, they have the money. Yes, everything looks shiny from the outside. They're not in alignment with their values. They're not playing to their strengths or their passions. I'm not saying this is for everyone, but there are
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
many people out there that are doing jobs that don't fulfill them because no one gave them this stuff. So uh, an invitation here would be lean in and get curious. Okay, you don't know what to do yet. You will. So stay open, stay curious. Do this process of figuring out what, or start the process of figuring out what are your values. You've already got strengths. I don't care who you are, you've already got them. You've already got passions. And you know what? There's more to discover. So this, I almost call it the data gathering stage. That first stage on your journey, the data's not in yet. And actually, by the way, the data's never in. You know, I'll still be getting more data when I'm 80. But certainly that early on your journey, the data's not in yet. So go out, explore, test, play, figure stuff out. But crucially, it's not like you're doing it with a blindfold on and going, well, I'll just try accountancy because my dad did it, or I'll try this because my best friend is doing it. You go, actually, where does my energy take me? And what feels like it would be in alignment with my values? And where are my strengths, and what kind of careers feel like they play in that space, and what am I passionate about, and what might that mean? So you don't have all the data, but the blindfold is off, and that will make a really big difference.
I really like that. Yeah, get curious. I'm always telling my students, you know, as you say, just see what piques your interest and just get out there and gather data. I really like that, Steve. Steve, I really want to talk about this is a good one. What's the most likely thing to hold people back from achieving their ambitions?
Beliefs.
Beliefs.
In my experience, there's a number of things. It's not just beliefs, but if you're asking what's the most likely, beliefs tends to be the one. So a belief is just a thought that you buy into. That's it. It's a thought, a fleeting thought that for whatever reason you bought into. Now, some of that you might have bought into for very good reason. You know, a lot of our beliefs serve us. And you'll know if a belief serves you if it fulfills two really simple criteria. Is it 100% true? And is it helpful? If it's true and helpful, brilliant. Believe it, and it will become part of your subconscious programming, and brilliant. It helps you see the world with more clarity, and it frees you up to take actions that you want to take. However, many of us, and myself included, again, this is a lifelong journey, we hold beliefs that they don't fulfill that criteria. They're not true. and they're not helpful. And therefore it's low quality programming. So for example, if your purpose compelled you to move into a field, and your values and your element, if in time, when you got clarity on them, once the data was in, you felt compelled to move into a space where you needed to kind of bring other people with you. You know, you actually needed to step into a leadership role and inspire kind of enthusiasm in others. Just the belief, I'm not a great leader, that's enough. That is going to hold you back in a whole host of ways. You may not even you may not even step into that career. Or if you do step into that career path, even if you've got the ability to be an amazing leader, and by the way, everyone has the ability to be an amazing leader in their own way, but if you stepped in and you still held that unconscious belief, the result will be that you have imposter syndrome, which is a really common, almost like an epidemic in our society, that we feel like we're a fraud and we're just about to get found out and we need to hide ourselves. So beliefs stop us and pull us off the line. And the line is living on purpose between your values and your purpose, your values and your vision of the world you want to inhabit. So it's a lifelong process of figuring out, okay, well, if this is what I'm here to do, this is where my unique contribution is, then what do I currently believe that will stop me from doing that? And just as helpful is the flip side of that, what do I need to believe about myself and the world to free me up to live fully on purpose? Those are two really powerful questions to ask.
That's fantastic. And I think, is there a crossover here with the whole concept of fixed and growth mindset? Because, and I guess the natural question is, well, how on earth do we get rid of limiting beliefs, I suppose, beliefs that hold us back? What can we do to get over that?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So yeah, in response to the first part, yes, massive crossover with the work of Carol Dweck. Amazing work in terms of fixed and growth mindset. So a fixed and a growth mindset, they're two beliefs. That's all they are. So for example, public speaking. If I believe, and by the way, I used to, now I speak, on stage and thrive. I used to, when I worked as an events director, where I was a bit of a square peg in a round hole, but when I worked as an events director, there was a period of my career where I was getting up on stage and introducing people like Tom Peters and Gordon Ramsay and Seb Coe and all these people. But I didn't believe that I was capable of doing that. I believed that someone like me cannot do that. So that was a fixed mindset. It wasn't saying, if the belief had been, I find this really scary right now, but I can get better.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read up on it and get a mentor and, do some practice or whatever and speak to my manager and work it through. That's a growth mindset. And that opens up the possibility for growth and evolution. But what I had was a fixed mindset of, I'm terrible at public speaking and someone like me can't do this. Now that is a glass ceiling right there. And that caused a huge amount of stress. It even led to panic attacks around the times when I was needing to get up on stage. I was freaking out because my belief system got completely in the way. So yeah, absolutely. That once you have a belief that you can get better at something, that's a growth mindset, and that frees up the glass ceiling. And we can get better at anything. And tying this back to the element piece, you can get better much quicker at things you're naturally good at. So yes, you can get better at other things, and you may choose to, but why make life hard for yourself? My invitation would be, figure out what you're really good at and get really good at that. And it'll be a much quicker, easier journey than figuring out what you're not naturally good at and trying really hard to get good at that. It's a much tougher journey. And then in answer to your second question, how do you go about kind of reframing beliefs? First stage is to realize what the belief is. So the clue there, again, playing detective, the clue is, where am I feeling a physical state or an emotional state I really don't want? So it might be anxiety, stress, whatever it may be, or anger. That's a clue that there's something going on in your beliefs that's triggering that in your body. And then ask yourself, okay, so what am I thinking that's creating that feeling? So using the public speaking example, back in the day when I was doing it, I was feeling really anxious, like really anxious. So what was I thinking that was driving that feeling in my body? Well, I was thinking I can't do this, and I was also thinking this is really scary. Like this is almost like a dangerous situation. So then once you've surfaced the beliefs, you then apply just those really two simple questions. Is it 100% true, and is it helpful? So was it 100% true that I'm terrible at public speaking, and basically, and always will be, was the second part of that belief. Well, it's not 100% true. I wasn't terrible, because some people would say to me, actually, you're doing pretty well. So like, terrible wasn't true. Also, is it 100% true that I can't get better? Well, no. I can get better at anything if I choose to. I didn't need to, but if I choose to, then I can get better. So it wasn't true. Was it helpful? Absolutely not. It was driving fight or flight to the extent that I was having panic attacks. Not helpful on any level at all. So then, if you know it's not true, it's not helpful, that's low quality programming. So why keep it? So then it's asking, well, what's the reverse? What would be 100% true and helpful? And the key thing here is not to go for a false affirmation. It's not to go for that, look in the mirror, the cheesy thing that some self-help books say, look in the mirror and say, I am the best. I'm the best. I can do this, I'm the best public speaker.
Yeah.
In my experience, it's still not 100% true. It's untrue with the intention of being helpful, but that still means it's therefore not helpful, because you can't lie to yourself. What would happen is I might pump myself up, but I would have stepped out on stage and felt like I was a fraud. I'd have had a mask on, and as soon as that mask fell off, I would have crumbled in just as bad a way, if not worse. So the crucial thing here is true and helpful. So true might be, do you know what? I am nervous at this stage, and most people would be. It's really natural. But do you know what? I've already had some feedback from people that I'm doing pretty well already, and experience shows me that I can get better each time. So do you know what? I choose to read up, to do everything I can to support myself, to practice, to get some mentoring, and I trust that in time I'll get better and better. So is that true? Yes, it's true. Is it helpful? Yeah, I'm no longer triggering fight or flight. I'm now staying much more calm. And do you know what? These things become self-fulfilling. In the first instance, it fulfills the prophecy. Everything goes terribly, and I affirm, it proves to me that I'm terrible at public speaking, and public speaking is scary, and I'll never go back there again. In this instance, same situation, same me, same mind. I now having a much better experience, and I come off, and now I'm going, do you know what? Maybe the belief is changing a little bit, that actually I'm starting to get good at public speaking. And then maybe 6 months down the line, I'm starting to believe, do you know what? I'm pretty good at it already, and I want to get exceptional. And then maybe a few years down the line, do you know what? I'm a really good public speaker. But you're not jumping to the end. You're honoring the process of getting there.
I really like that. And just a really simple statement is the whole, you've got to learn to walk before you can run. And I think what you're describing is, it's so interesting, isn't it? And you are an expert of this, the whole case of thought drives feeling, which drives behavior. And just this whole growth mindset, appreciating that it's not going to happen overnight, will start improving the quality of your thoughts, and as you describe, your feeling will feel, you'll feel less anxious, and then ultimately your behavior will be favorable, and actually reaffirming that actually I can do this and I will get better over time.
Absolutely.
Steve, listen, you've absolutely fulfilled what I was after. I feel so grateful to have you on, for you to be here. Any final advice for young people about living a fulfilling life that you want to, get off your chest?
Okay. I'll share my favorite quote, which comes from Mother Teresa. Life is an adventure. Dare it. Life is an adventure. Dare it. So what I take from that is, if you think of life as this journey, and it is an infinite journey, there's no right or wrong path. You can go anywhere. You can experience anything. And when you go somewhere that's in alignment with your values, who you are at that deepest level, when you're playing and operating in that space of your element where you're meant to be, it's where you thrive. And when you're curious and open to a sense of purpose, and get to a point maybe where that's clarified, and you're contributing towards a better life and a better world, that's a remarkable space, and life meets you where you meet it. So if you're meeting it there, life will meet you there, and you will experience things that, yeah, an extraordinary life. Or you can go somewhere else and you might get a bit burned. But now the being burned is no longer a bad thing. It's a sign, okay, that's valuable data. I'm just off track. So there's no blame here. It's done innocently. So I didn't like that. Why didn't I like that? That value, that must be a value. Oh, do you know what? I didn't play to my strengths and my passions. So everything in life is a clue that's helping you navigate your journey. So my invitation is dare it and stay open to the data as it keeps coming in.
Steve, I have huge respect for you and what you're doing. Just to, to reaffirm this, that Steve, obviously he's written this book and it really is fantastic. And he's kindly agreed for you guys to have access to the chapters on actually finding your values, all of the value stuff we've discussed, and then also the purpose piece. So just to help you guys out, I will put a link on the careersbadger.org website beneath this video and also on the homepage. So if you just click that, fill in your details, and we'll get that sent to you. But Steve, listen, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
It's been such a pleasure. I love catching up with you anyway. So it's been a huge pleasure, and I really hope that, for your followers and listeners, that this has been valuable. So yeah, and I hope that the tools in the book as well help give a bit of clarity and mean there's a bit less suffering on the journey to purpose than I went through on my journey.
Brilliant. Steve, thank you so much. Thanks very much.
Amazing. Brilliant. Thanks, James.
Bye-bye. Bye.